Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this amazing series of Dawah Made Easy. In today's episode, we are going to speak on a very crucial matter, and which is not commonly spoken as yet, but the later things happening in US especially, and things are getting out of hand. We thought of making a small episode giving some perspective of what's happening in US and what's the relation between Islam and Black lives, and how do we approach this particular matter. Inshallah, today we have with us brother Wasim Azri. Assalamu alaikum brother.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh,
How
brother.
are you?
Alhamdulillah.
That's good. So brother, just to start with, just give a bit of insight on this Black Lives Matter movement.
Right. Well, see, we are all aware about the horrific event or the incident that has happened in the United States of America in the last week of the month of May in 2020, where a person by the name George Floyd, a black American who was brutally murdered in the broad daylight by none other than the very police officers who arrested him, and the sheer brutality by which he was murdered, where the officer put his knee on his back, on his neck, and other officers put their knee on the back of the person and succumbed him to death. So that sparked this entire response or a reaction, which is now taking place as a Black Lives movement. So this is exactly what has happened, and which has brought people into limelight, the atrocities as well the institutionalized racism that is taking place in the United States of America. But the interesting part is it is also highlighted similar racism or class society that we have even here in Australia. For example, the atrocities that take place against the Aboriginal community, the owners of the land in Australia, and even you may include, for example, the Palestinian people who are being oppressed by the Israeli racist regime. So this is exactly what the Black Lives Matter has, although started in America, and has highlighted the problem of racism in America against the black Americans, but has also brought light onto the people across the globe.
So, if you can see, people are sharing other stories as well, which happened in the last century or in the last decade as well. Uh, how far back can we trace this Black Lives Movement matter
Right.
movement and and stuff like that?
Well, very soon when we saw this Black Lives movement being vocal and the voice being raised, and a lot of what you call protests that were taking place across America, and then as I mentioned, it also got extended all the way to the United Kingdom, to Australia, and various other parts of the world. It highlighted not just the murder of George Floyd. It is not about that one person who has been murdered. Obviously, we all stand in solidarity. We all have our hearts attached to that murder, where we stand in shoulder to shoulder with the family of George Floyd, and we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala show guidance and give solace to the family of George Floyd. But it has highlighted something more than that. It was not just the murder of one Floyd, rather it erupted the pain, the suffering of people that has been ongoing for a long period of time. For example, now the black lives or the black Americans in United States of America have been subjugated and oppressed, not just in the modern 21st century, but this has been an ongoing problem for no less than 4 centuries. It goes back all the way 4 centuries, to the extent that if you read in the books of history, you see that 4 centuries ago, this entire enslavement of black Americans took place. No less than 4 million people were bondaged, absolute bondage in the United States of America. And since then, in an institutionalized format, in a format of white supremacy that has been taking place over these centuries, is what is you see the people are reacting against.
Uh, you know how we say that Islam has got all the answers for modern day problems, and since Islam was revealed, we have a solution for all the problems. So, can you give a Islamic solution, or how do we combat from Islamic perspective of this
Well,
racism issue?
very true. See, as a Muslim, we claim or we believe that Islam has got teaching to deal with every situation. Now, when it comes to racism, see, racism is not a problem that I see somebody today of a different color and I make a comment. Yes, that is part of racism. But racism is much more than that. It is instilled in the society. It is programmed in the society. So it needs to, in order to tackle it, you need to really take a few steps back and tackle it from the grassroots. That is where the problem needs to be solved from. So if we look at the Islamic teachings, for example, one of the main ayats of the Quran that is often used in regards to tackling this, I call it an anti-racism pill, this ayah. The ayah of the Quran is from Surah Hujurat, Surah number 49, ayah number 13, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the entire human race and says, O human beings, we have created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and then made you into nations and tribes, so that you may recognize one another. Verily, the most honorable in the sight of God is the one who has taqwa, God consciousness. Verily, Allah is well aware, and He has knowledge of all the affairs. So from this ayah, we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is instilling this very idea, or tackling this problem of racism, or the race problem, as you can say, which is nothing but having superiority over another group of people. What was Iblis' error, for example? Iblis did not refuse the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of ibadah. Iblis did not refuse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he wouldn't do sujood to Allah. Iblis refused, though he had the knowledge of oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he refused because he said, I am better than Adam. This idea that I'm better than somebody is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tackles in this ayah. Allah is saying, you all are siblings to each other. You all come from the same tree, same progeny of Adam alayhi salam, for one pair of human beings. Then the thought that you are better than the other, then your color is better than the other, then you are superior than the other, is completely eliminated. So this ayah is one of the teachings which we say, it instills right from the beginning the idea that you're not better than the other. Then the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which comes from the final khutbah of the Prophet in Hajjatul Wida, the Prophet says that, no Arab is superior to a non-Arab, neither is a non-Arab superior to an Arab. Now the second portion of this hadith, imagine these words being resonated in the Parliament of America today. Try to imagine the impact that it would have. Somebody stands in the middle of the Parliament of America, and this is what is missing right now. Even with the President of America and all the other authorities, they're talking about tackling this problem and responding to the Black Lives Matter. None of them are repeating these words. Now just imagine these words being spoken in the middle of the Parliament of America while there is chaos across the society. The words of the Prophet ﷺ, I repeat, he said, no white is superior to a black, neither is a black superior to a white, except through their righteousness and their good action. If this was said and implemented, the problem of race society is going to be tackled. So I say, if Islam is going to tackle, yes, Islam has got a solution. It has these teachings which would tackle this problem from the very grassroots in the society.
Inshallah. So you can easily say that Iblis was the first racist since the creation of the whole universe.
Yeah, well, definitely yes.
So now my question would come to, obviously this is in the mind of many Muslims. Alhamdulillah, Islam has been around since centuries, and we have a lot of black Muslims. But can you give some examples who are more prominent Muslims, both from the Seerah and probably from the last century or our era?
Well, a very important thing, because this gives us some perspective to how the Muslims have been dealing with this problem right from day one. With the coming of the Prophet ﷺ, we see that the Quran has an ayah which speaks about racism. We have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, all of this is talk, all of this is teachings, all of this is theory. How does it really convert into practicality? So we see that there have been companions of the Prophet ﷺ who were what you can call black Muslims right from day one. For example, we have the famous story of Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu anh, who was a black Abyssinian slave who embraced Islam, and he was given equal status in the society along with the elites of Makkah who embraced Islam. So Islam has shown it right from the beginning. But some of the prominent names that come to my mind is Bilal radiallahu anh. We have Ayman, who was also the caretaker of the Prophet ﷺ, who was a black slave of the father of the Prophet ﷺ, who was then gifted to the Prophet, or who looked after the Prophet, but she came along with the Prophet in inheritance. And Ayman was there. And then we have the son of Zayd ibn Harisa radiallahu anh, who is Usama ibn Zayd. He is said to be one of the black companions of the Prophet ﷺ. who is also titled as beloved of the beloved. So the Habib, yani the beloved of the beloved, that is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that is Usama ibn Zayd. Then we have other Sahaba as well. For example, there is an Ansari Sahabi, Ayman radiallahu an. There is also another Sahabi. So we have no less than around 7 prominent black Muslim companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who were present right at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we could see that they were treated equally in all affairs and aspects of life. So this is something very important to note. And then we come even in our time, for example, some of the prominent black American activists, while we are at it, is Malcolm X, for example. He embraced Islam, and he was a black activist who was working against the class system that was existent in American society. Furthermore, we have the popular boxer, Muhammad Ali, who was also a black American who converted to Islam, and he stood his ground against the oppression and the subjugation of the black Americans that was being taking place in America in the last century. So these are some names that come into the mind immediately when we talk about black Americans or black Muslims from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Can you give any practical example from the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he actually tackled the issue of this class system or racism against black and stuff like that?
So I think very, very important point that you have raised. If we go back 1400 years into the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, look at the setting of the time at that situation. There was a class society. There is absolute racism there. There is slavery system in place. In the midst of that, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is born to the elites of Makkah. His father is Abdullah and his grandfather is Abdul Muttalib, who is one of the leaders of Quraysh in Makkah. Now the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he grew up, he was given a slave from Khadija radiallahu anha, Zayd ibn Harisa. Now Zayd ibn Harisa was also an Arab, belonging to an Arab tribe, but his tribe was attacked by another tribe and was taken as a slave, and then he was sold in Mecca, and then he came as a slave or as a servant to Khadija radiallahu anha. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam married Khadija radiallahu anha, she gifted him to the Prophet. Now when the Prophet ﷺ got him as a servant, the Prophet ﷺ, this is even before the coming of Islam, the Prophet treated him absolutely with love and affection, to the extent that some writers, some historians, they say that Zayd ibn Harisa, some have argued that probably he wasn't a black slave, the others argued that he was a black slave. So either way, he was somebody who was not amongst the most handsome men of Arabia. He was a slave to talk about. He did not have any wealth or possession at his time. And while he was at this, now the Prophet ﷺ, who belongs to the elite, he's treating this person who has been gifted to him as a servant as somebody who loves him to the extent that he calls him his son. That when after a couple of years, when Zayd ibn Harisa's parents, after looking for him, since that tribe was attacked, comes back looking for Zayd, and they reach the Prophet ﷺ. Now look at this, the Prophet ﷺ gives absolute permission to the parents of Zayd to take him away. Now until that time, the Prophet took him as a servant and was treating him with absolute love and affection. So Zayd, when he saw his parents, obviously he wanted to go back with his parents, but he chose not to. Because when he saw the love and affection from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, I would love to stay back with my adopted father. Now at this juncture, the Prophet ﷺ held the hand of Zayd and took him near the Kaaba and declared that I adopt Zayd as my son today. And the Prophet said, if I die before him, Zayd would inherit from me. And the Prophet said, if he dies before me, I would inherit from Zayd. Now look at this. You have got an absolute racist society where there is class division, and then you have got this slavery system in place. But the Prophet is taking that slave as his son and declares that he would give his inheritance to him, and he destroys the absolute class system that was built in the Quraysh, in the Arab society. So the Prophet changed the society upside down. He took him as one of his own. Now obviously then the revelation of the ayats of the Quran came in Surah Ahzab, Surah number 33 and number 37, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed that call them by the name of their fathers. Because to the extent that the Sahabi Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anh, he says that we used to call Zayd by no other name than Zayd ibn Muhammad. So the Prophet literally took him as adopted child. So with the ayah of the Quran, the command of Allah was, now you can foster him, you do the foster care, you're a foster parent, but you do not give him the name of the father, because there are repercussions to that in the future. There are consequences to that. So you love him, you look after him, but you don't give the fatherly name, because the fatherly name is the right of the biological father. So we leave it at that. Now the Prophet ﷺ took him. Now, interestingly, Zayd, who is a black slave of that time, who was now a son to the Prophet ﷺ, he's the only companion of the Prophet mentioned in the Quran by name. And that is in Surah Ahzab, Surah number 33, ayah number 37. The previous command was in ayah number 5. Now in ayah number 37, these are the two places in Surah Ahzab where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Zayd radiallahu anhu. But in this ayah, it speaks directly by name of Zayd. فَلَمَّا قَضَى زَيْدٌ مِّنْهَا. That when Zayd is done with his wife. So this is mentioning Zayd radiallahu anhu by name in the Quran. So if somebody is talking about how Islam treated the black community or the black Muslims, it is with utmost respect and absolute equality and justice. It was not just in matters of words, but it was practicality implemented in the society, which shook the Arab society of that time. So this is one example that comes to my mind.
And I believe that Zayd ibn Harith radiallahu anh, he is the only Sahabi mentioned by name in the Quran.
Exactly, very true. That is exactly the case there. Yeah.
So before to wind up our session, should we Muslims participate in Black Lives Matter movement? And how do we get involved with these kind of movements, especially in Australia?
Sure. Well, very interesting and very what you call legitimate question related to our times. And this is important, where Muslims should really be standing for it. One further example, for example, Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu anhu. We are very well aware of the famous story of Bilal radiallahu anhu, that he was a black Abyssinian slave who was freed, and then he was treated equally and with absolute justice with all the companions of the Prophet. He was given the command or the instruction to lead the first Azan by climbing on the roof of Kaaba. So the roof of Kaaba, when he climbed up, imagine this. The Arabs, the Kaaba is not just the holiest structure for Muslims. Kaaba is the holiest structure for the Arab elite pagans as well. So the Prophet, by asking Bilal radiallahu anhu to climb on the Kaaba and give the Adhan, was to destroy the racism in its entirety, eliminate it to the extent. So when that has happened, we Muslims today should also be very active and proactive in this matter. Now, while the Black Lives Matter, the BLM movement is happening, yes, we Muslims stand shoulder to shoulder as a reaction to what has happened in America. We further state our support to any community who is being subjugated and oppressed in different parts of the world. So while we are here in Australia, we know the amount of oppression that has been committed against the Aboriginal community. So we stand in solidarity with the Aboriginal community. We need to stand shoulder to shoulder. We need to raise their issues. We need to demand equality and equal rights, and demand that no racism is perpetrated against them. For example, here in Australia, it is said in the last 20 to 30 years, no less than 400 Aboriginal young people have been killed or murdered while they were under police custody. This is something serious. So it's not a matter of one day or one issue, but we need to raise this issue on a continuous level and stand in shoulder to shoulder with our Aboriginal community. Now, how do we show support? We need to be careful. I'm not talking about strategic alliance. That needs to be taken based on the political stand by the Muslim leaders and the Muslim activists. But what we are talking about is individually we need to support, organizationally, and as a society, as a community, we need to support. But do we present an alliance in elections, in democracy, and all of that? That needs to be a political strategy to be taken. We should make sure that we stand on our terms in every matter, because every community is standing across the globe for their rights while we are at it. For example, the LGBT community is standing with the Black Lives Matter for their rights. The socialist politicians are standing in solidarity to move forward with their political agenda. We've got the left movement, leftist movements who are involved for their purpose. So we need to be careful while making a political alliance. But as far as showing support and raising voice in order to show solidarity with them, we must stand in every matter in solidarity with them. Furthermore, the way we need to show support is not just by words. We need to really indulge with them, stand with them on a daily basis, work with them. For example, take the story of Malcolm X. He was a black American activist. When he embraced Islam, he didn't embrace Islam out of nowhere. Somebody talked to him. The Dawah was given to him. He embraced Islam. Now look at the beauty, the way he gave Dawah to the black Americans and to American society. His famous words are recorded. He said, if white Americans could embrace Islam, if they could accept the oneness of God, that is Allah, they too could accept the oneness of human race. And then they would cease to compare others with difference of color. And if they are able to understand that Islam has got the solution to the race problem, all thinking Americans should be more respectful towards Islam, because the problem of racism has become like an incurable cancer in the American society. So these are the words of black American activists such as Malcolm X. So we Muslims need to be really, repeating these words and this language while we are dealing with our non-Muslim black community members. So we should really stand further, deal with their problems, and indulge ourselves, involve ourselves with them.
Jazakallah khair. We hope that this was an informative session for all of us, and inshallah we will try to learn from this and try to implement as well. And until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.